Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for a Week 2 edition of Inside the Zone with Justin Kinney of Optimum Performance Sports. Justin.
Yes, sir.
Week 1 takeaways. What are they? I think I know what they are, but I want to make sure that we don't have a knee-jerk reaction.
Correct, yes.
That's the number one thing that we've learned over the years of doing this show is Week 1, yeah, you get a taste of what a team might be like, but boy, it's going to be way different by Week 9.
You know, the knee-jerk reactions out of Week 1 are Snyder's great, they're the best team in the SAC. Carroll's considerably down from last year because they lose to Hamilton Southeastern on the road. New Haven's the best team in the NE8. Bishop Luers is the worst team in 15 years. Bishop Dwenger is way down. I always temper the enthusiasm after 1 week. Let's get through 3 weeks and then evaluate. But there are some matchups here in Week 2 that will give us a little more clarity.
Yeah, when you take a look at the SAC, that was the big talk going into Week 1 is how are they going to fare against these indie teams? I was always saying best case scenario was like 6 wins.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario was probably 3, and they only came away with 2.
They came away with 2.
But I don't think all those losses are as bad as they
right.
look.
I agree.
Specifically the Carroll-Hamilton Southeastern game, because that's a 28-14 game at Hamilton Southeastern. They're marching down the football field, and they throw an interception that goes for a pick 6. That's like a 14-point swing
right.
when you're at the 30-yard line and looking to score, and then they get 6 really quick. So that ball game was a lot closer, I think, than that score would indicate. And then some of the other games.
Carmel-Homestead.
Carmel-Homestead. Homestead really looked good.
Speaking of pick 6, that was a perfectly placed pass by Michael White there that's dropped. That could have been a touchdown. Literally a couple plays later, a pick 6 that goes the other way with 5.5 to go. That is the winning margin. I mean, Homestead was there driving with a chance, and I agree with you. Some of those games, you look at 2 and 8 and say that's terrible, but you start looking at some of these games and say they were a lot closer, a lot more respectable than we thought.
Yeah, all is not lost, I guess is my point.
And this is the thing, too, you're hearing, too, about the NE8. Well, they got 2 wins in convincing fashion of the SAC. Look at the NE8. We're like, just hold on a little bit. Hold on a little bit because you could say, well, Northrop, they may be one of the worst teams in the SAC. Bishop Luers didn't look great either at Kendallville. But 1 week does not a season make.
Talking about Week 2, and you mentioned East Noble and Luers. I want to talk about this because you could say, who had the biggest, most impressive win in Week 1? I think you would go with East Noble, 45-7 against Bishop Luers, or you would go with Snyder, 42-20 at Warren Central. And now they get to square off. It's going to be our Highlight Zone game of the week. We're going to be back in Kendallville for the 2nd week in a row. What do you want to see in this one? Because both teams are riding high and really hit the ground running with nice victories in Week 1.
And both of them won in Week 1 with similar game plans. Just grind it out, run the football. We saw Kieron Billingsley and Uriah Buchanan go for a collective almost 300 yards in that game against Warren Central. East Noble running the ball 63 times for almost 300 yards against Bishop Luers. This is a strength-on-strength type matchup, but I don't think East Noble is going to be able to do to Snyder what it did against Bishop Luers. It was able to just grind Bishop Luers down. Bishop Luers' defense never really broke. It just kept giving up 3, 4, 5 yards a run, and East Noble was able to move ball down the field methodically. They also recovered 3 onside kicks, which also helps tremendously. And
that's not bad.
Further wore down that Bishop Luers defense, but looking at this matchup, you're saying, okay, can East Noble do what they did against Bishop Luers? You say, the strength of that Snyder defense is particularly up front. So I think if East Noble is going to be able to be in this game, they're going to have to be a different team offensively than what we saw on Friday. And Snyder, you're going, man, what they did to Warren Central was impressive. Warren Central is not the Warren of even 5 years ago, but it's still a really good win. And so I think it's going to be a telling matchup for both of these teams on Friday.
Talking about our Week 1 game of the week, on the flip side, Bishop Luers with a rough start. If you're Kyle Lindsey, now you've got to guard Mylan Graham. Now you've got to guard Johnny Washington. And you take on this New Haven ball club where really New Haven didn't have to use those receiver weapons because Trey Bates ran the ball so well earlier in the game against the Bruins. How do you see New Haven Luers playing out this week? And what's the message to Luers who, you don't want to start 0-2, but they're going to be tested by a really, really good offense and a team that did nothing but increase their confidence after a win against the Bruins in Week 1.
I think in a way this plays better into Bishop Luers' hands than Week 1 because it is a team that's going to come out and spread and try to push the ball on the edges and downfield. And I think Bishop Luers is made to defend that style a little bit better as opposed to what East Noble was doing against them. But at the same time, New Haven really showcased against an inferior Northrop team, significantly inferior Northrop team, though, just how dangerous that offense can be. and they're going to try to keep it rolling in week 2. So it's another matchup between, okay, let's find out a little bit more about these teams. Everybody's high on New Haven right now after what happened in week 1. Everybody's so down on Bishop Luers after what happened in week 1. Let's see this game. I expect it to be closer for both teams, but I still think New Haven, you look at what would have the edge. But Bishop Luers, a chip on their shoulder after what happened last week.
How crucial of a game is this early in the season for Carroll when they host Warren Central this coming Friday? Because you don't want to start 0-2 after coming off a trip to the 6A state finals and proving that our teams in 6A can win against Indy teams last year.
And I think that after week 1, we're looking at, okay, Snyder is at the top and Carroll is here. But we don't know how good Hamilton Southeastern is. We feel like they're pretty good, probably a top 5 team in the state.
Yeah.
We're not really sure how good Warren Central is. Are they as good as Hamilton Southeastern? We're not sure. So this is a direct, although they're not playing each other, this gives Carroll an opportunity to play a like opponent of Snyder. We saw what the Panthers were able to do on the road against Warren Central. Can Carroll get back on track, protect Jimmy Sullivan that they weren't able to do last week, and look like the Carroll that we saw last year? I think this is a very telling game for the Chargers, and we'll see if they can bounce back against Warren Central at home.
The only SAC on SAC game, which actually doesn't count in the standings because they're in different divisions, is Wayne and Northrop this week. After last week and the way that they handled Crispus Attucks, I know that Crispus Attucks might not be great this year, but is Wayne the team to beat in the small division in the SAC?
They could be. I think we're already seeing some interesting changes in the small division because everybody assumed Northside's there. They lose to Northridge. Northridge's a good football team.
Right.
But now they got to go to Lawrence North, and Lawrence North is a really good 6A. And so all of a sudden, does that open the door for Wayne? We haven't seen Wayne's defense be challenged yet. I don't know if they're challenged this week with Northrop and the shakiness of that offensive front. But you have to like what you saw week 1 out of Wayne when you look at spreading the ball around and Tolles with a touchdown and Sharon with a touchdown, Mack with a touchdown. DeAndre Williams didn't have a TD, but you know he's going to break out.
Right.
So I think the storyline in that small division, we were centering on 2 teams. Do we add Wayne to that equation?
Okay, so you look at Homestead at Noblesville, Northside at Lawrence North, Bishop Dwenger at Cincinnati Moeller. Our local teams will not be favored in those games, most likely.
No, that Moeller trip is terrifying.
So what do you expect to get these teams from our area to get out of these games? Like what's the end goal here? Because Cincinnati Moeller, as you mentioned last week, it started as a top 40 team in the country. I mean, they're a powerhouse. And then, as we know, Northside, without Jordan King, without Tate Johnson, they're just a different ball club.
Right. You hope you get Tay back this week. At least you'd like to get Jordan King back as well. But you're going on the road against a really good Lawrence North team that's getting votes in 6A. And it's a really, really sound football team. So Northridge was that team that even with those guys out, you felt like Northside could take care of business. It didn't score an offensive touchdown against Northridge. Now they have to go on a road against a 6A, really good 6A team. So this is the time of the year where if you start off slow, they can really start snowballing in the negative direction. So you really need some positives coming out of week 2 when you look at Northside, look at Bishop Dwenger. Even just a solid performance on the road against some of these teams would be very helpful as the conference season looms starting in week 3.
Speaking of solid performance, I don't want to not mention Southside.
Yes.
They went down to Marion, played. It was a one-score game. Now they host South Bend St. Joe on that new turf this coming Friday. It just feels like they have some excitement. Even though they lost, it just feels like there's just a little bit of juice with that team.
You're up 17-0 at halftime at Marion. You're feeling pretty good, on top of the world, and then you give up 22 points in the second half. You're inside the 5, first and goal at the 4, can't punch it in, which ended up being the real difference in that game. So there was positives and there were also negatives for Southside. They just need to make sure that the positives outweigh the negatives. And that's kind of what the thing with Southside is, and some of these teams that have struggled over the years is when things go bad, they just allow it to keep going bad. So you need to take what worked last week, take it into a winnable football game at home. Should be a lot of excitement with that new turf. Southside right now is the team that I think everybody is rooting for to get that win. You want to see Southside succeed. Andre Goodwell, great dude, great coach. You just want to see that team get some sort of positivity. Had some last week, didn't finish it. Hopefully they are able to this week.
We talked about the SAC. They've just really dominated the storylines in the first couple of weeks and in the preseason. I want to talk about some of the schools outside of the city of Fort Wayne.
Yep.
Leo at Angola is a matchup where both these teams are looking to get right this
Yeah.
week. Leo went down to Kokomo. They led 14-3 at the half, ended up losing. Weren't able to hang on defensively in the fourth quarter against Kokomo. But we do know what type of program
Right.
Kokomo has. And I think at the beginning of last season when they lost, we were like, oh. Now
Yeah.
it's like, you know what? They are pretty good.
Yeah, right.
Kokomo is pretty good. And then you take a look at an Angola team who won the NECC Big Division title last year and had some trouble defending the pass against DeKalb last week.
They did. I mean, that secondary really struggled against DeKalb. You felt like DeKalb with Tegan Ertgoing was going to struggle, but then they were able to insert Aiden Lytle into the equation, the former Garrett quarterback, and hit the ground running. So these are two teams that would love to be 1-1 as opposed to 0-2 at the end of this week. Leo in particular, letting that one slip away, double-digit lead in the second half, couldn't finish, and you come back and you lost to them by 20 last year, only by a couple this year. So I guess you're looking at it as improvement, but you hope if you're Leo, you're not entering the NE8 season 0-2, because then you're looking at, you got to play Columbia City, and you got to play New Haven, you got to play East Noble, and it can really struggle then. But in Angola too, you look at behind center, you put Hawkins Hasselman back there. The sophomore has some good things, rushes for over 100 yards, threw for 3 touchdowns, also threw for 3 interceptions. So you take the good with the bad with a young quarterback, with a really dynamic athlete, and you see what you can do. So for that matchup, I feel like it's two teams that really want to take advantage of their strengths going into this, get back to really getting the ball to Brock Schott consistently, protecting a quarterback so you can get to the ball to Brock Schott and Caden Hurst. So I think those are the obstacles for Leo going into this week.
And I think those are the numbers that jumped out to me, is that Kokomo outgained them by 200 yards offensively. You know, I think Kokomo had about 360 and Wayne had about 160. Although Caden Hurst did have a 90, I mean, it looked like 100 yards.
He caught it like at the 1 foot line,
yeah,
looked like, right?
Yeah, it looked like his back foot might have been in the end zone, but whatever.
Yeah.
Well, forget about that. So that takes away opportunities offensively. Obviously, you'll take 100 yards on special teams.
Yeah.
But I know they wanted to execute a little bit better offensively, and that'll be something to watch for this week. Another really great matchup outside the area. We're talking about Adams Central at Eastside. Coach Brandewee passed his first test with a 30-20 win at Woodland last week.
Yep.
Now they get it home. And Adams Central against Garrett last week started a little slow. It was, I believe, 14-0 at half.
Yeah.
Keegan Bloom gets a touchdown early in the third quarter to make it 20-0. But I remember watching on my phone, I was like, oh, it's only 20-0. Like,
Yeah.
I thought they would get off to a faster start than that. It's week 1. I understand that. But if you're Adams Central, these have been really good games, competitive games in the past. What are you looking to take away from this game when Adams Central heads up to Butler this coming Friday?
Well, it's another barometer game, particularly for Eastside. So they took care of business last week and get the win on the road, and now you're feeling, okay, now they got AC, and we'll see. And these matchups, particularly in recent years, have been very good showdowns when Eastside and AC have been really good. And I guess the question with Eastside is, can they continue the run that they've been on? And now you're going to find out against a really good opponent. And conversely, Adams Central, they had to replace some guys up front. They've lost some guys up front as well over the course of the preseason and stuff. So I think that's the biggest barometer for me for Adams Central, is their protection needs to be sound. They need to be opening up holes, protecting Jack Hamilton in the pocket when he goes to throw. That's the biggest question for Adams Central. And in their quest to win another ACAC championship and go deep in the postseason, and how does that line come together? I think there may be some questions there in week 2 that we otherwise haven't in previous years, and this will be another good test against Dane Siebert and company up in Butler.
You take a look at the Whitley County rivalry game last week at Busco, a dominant performance by Columbia City.
Yeah.
I think they graduated such a talented senior class that was full of leadership. We kind of wondered if they would be able to pick up where they left off. Because of the youth on Busco, I don't know that we have a lot of answers after week 1. They got Plymouth at Columbia City this week. If you're Brett Fox, you have to be pleased with the way you played in week 1, but not necessarily satisfied, because you obviously want to continue to improve week to week.
And another team in Plymouth that is trying to get back to where they used to be and have struggled in recent years and trying to rebuild. So now we're sure what Plymouth can bring to this game on Friday. Hopefully it's an improved Plymouth squad.
Yeah.
But if it's still a team that can't match up with Columbia City, you almost come through the first 2 weeks going, man, do we really know much about Columbia City, right, as well? And the key for the Eagles offensively is if they can establish that run, which they were able to do last week and all throughout last season, then it's difficult to stop them, because they have a weapon in Stratton Fuller that forces you to stay honest defensively, and they can run it 8 out of 10 times, but those 1 or 2 times they go to pass it, Stratton Fuller is going to burn you. So that's exactly what happened against Busco. You expect more of the same against Plymouth, but depending on how of a quality team Plymouth is this year, we may come out of week 2 still wondering how good Columbia City is.
I'll say this. We may not be talking enough about West Noble.
I know, I agree.
Right?
Let's
Like,
talk about the Chargers.
25th season, Monty Mayhorter knows what he's doing.
Yep.
He's got Seth Pruitt in the backfield. He's got a number of skill position guys back. I know Central Noble has got a new head coach, and they're trying to figure some things out. Graduation hit them pretty hard. But they put a whooping on Central Noble, did West Noble.
They did.
And I think, I'm not certain they're not the team to beat in that big division right now.
The entirety of the NECC at this point.
That's a
Is
good
West Noble
point.
the best team in the NECC?
That
now here
is
we are.
possible.
We started this off by not making blanket statements, and here we are 10 minutes in saying, here it is, West Noble, best team in the NECC.
They haven't even played a conference game yet, so that's how smart.
listen to us.
That's how smart we are. Yeah. And also, I thought Heritage Kobe Meyer. I know Belmont again is still struggling under Nick Hall, trying to get their feet under them, but was impressed with Heritage in week 1. And we've seen under Casey Kolkman, they go to 2 wins, to 4 wins, to 6 wins, including the South Adams victory, which was a big over-the-hump victory for them last year. Can they ascend and take another step forward this year to compete with the likes of AC and some of the top teams in that conference?
I mean, Bluffton, after getting shut out by Northfield last year in week 1, just absolutely destroys them this year. And it was so much coming back in Bluffton. You got to be excited. You know, freshman running back scoring 3 touchdowns for them. So there's so much to like. ACAC, they were 1 game away from a perfect week with winning. So Woodland dropping that one to Eastside was the only loss. So when you look at the dynamic of that league, that for so long we've talked about Adams Central and South Adams, could we be reaching a point where we can talk about Heritage, we can talk about Bluffton, and really kind of being factors, and could be a league where every week, kind of like where we're at the NE8 the last couple seasons, where there's 2 or 3 games a week where you're like, it could go either way.
Yeah, this will be interesting. What are you most looking forward to about week 2? What are you looking to figure out here in week 2? Because obviously first impressions can be incorrect, or they can be incomplete, I guess is a better way to say it.
I'm looking towards the top of the SAC because people are ready to put Snyder atop the SAC already after 1 week, and I just don't know about Carroll. And I think we're going to find a lot about the Chargers on Friday with that like opponent in Warren Central. So that's kind of what's got my eye this week, and also see if the NE8 can continue the bragging rights in the SAC at least through week 1.
All right. It should be very interesting. Again, it's the first 2 weeks like we've never had, so there's just been plenty to talk about and plenty to prognosticate over the last couple of weeks. We'll sort it all out Friday. Justin will be back Monday for Inside the Zone here on Wayne.com. For Justin, I'm Glenn. We'll see you next week.